Okay, so viewer beware. You're about to hear me brag about myself, at least kinda sorta. Earlier this year, on June 25th to be precise, I released this video. The basic point and synopsis can be boiled down to my prediction that the gaming market, at the very least on a AAA level, would decline and consolidate in a fairly extreme way. The markets would crash, for lack of a better word, and the effects would be severe for larger publishers that have slipped into a pattern of predatory monetization and adopted increasingly consumer unfriendly habits. This right here is June 25th for reference on the stock price charts for some of the largest AAA publishers. We have EA, Ubisoft, Activision, Take-Two, and the list goes on and on. About a month after I posted the video, the bottom fell out and the market began to shift as the investor sentiment winds changed. Consumers began to experience harsher and harsher unrest with new releases, and the market, point for point, as I predicted, began to fall. Recently, quite a few people have reached out to me referencing a video by The Quartering that discusses the video game industry and claims that a crash is not just coming, but that we are already in it. And I agree. The main reasoning was that the tech industry as a whole, akin to the automobile industry, has taken the approach of incremental upgrades that resell what is essentially the same product to the same audience as frequently as possible. And as a result, consumers are suffering from a sort of financial fatigue and are overall reaching the end of their tolerance for such a practice. I agree, to an extent, but I believe that the issues within the gaming industry are far more numerous and also more specific. Over time, we have seen an evolution in monetization techniques, but like the fabled frog in boiling water, we have not truly perceived what is actually happening. The fable goes that when dropping a frog into boiling water, it will immediately react and jump out of that water. But when dropping a frog into tepid water, then slowly bringing the temperature to a boil, the frog will be unaware of what is happening and thus is cooked alive. The same situation can be seen in the gaming industry. If we were to take a PlayStation 1 or PlayStation 2 gamer, maybe an Xbox original gamer, possibly even the 360 from many years ago, that has been isolated from the more recent monetization trends, and drop them onto an Xbox One or a PlayStation 4 console with a list of potential games to purchase, they would be intrigued by the graphical fidelity, possibly, but they would immediately be confused and disgusted by the microtransaction practices, having XP boosters and loot boxes and other skins shoved in their face constantly. They would also, over time, realize that DLC price tags and season passes constitute a massive additional charge to round out an equivalent amount of content that they were previously used to getting with their base purchase. And even deeper, on-disc DLC, paywalled, at release, waiting to be flipped live that is already developed, and pay-to-win mechanics that are seeping in through every crack. That gamer would represent a frog being dropped into boiling water. They would immediately be aware, acutely aware of what is going on, and they would want no part of it. Unfortunately, that type of isolated, fresh perspective is almost non-existent. Instead, we have a vast majority of gamers that are frogs in warm water that has been slowly brought to a boil and is now nearly too hot to survive in. And as a result, some are starting to realize, though it may in fact be too late to avoid what is coming. And in a lot of ways, it's already here. To demonstrate this further, we go over to the amazing, highly professional, and totally precise Microsoft Paint. I'm not going to script this part either because I can't multitask today, and while drawing this stuff, it would be way too difficult to talk as well, at least right now, so not scripted, this next part. So in the past, we have had video game development costs, and this is of course still true, but I'll be drawing kind of a historical perspective here, and we'll do that in green. So the cost of developing video games, the cost of marketing video games, in general, the cost associated with both building and then buying games has started low and continued to increase. That's not green. Has started low and continued to increase. So let's go back here and then draw this up. Let's say it's fairly linear for the sake of just an easy demonstration. So the cost has been increasing. Now, at times it may go slightly more horizontal and then slightly more vertical, but it continues at a fairly decent rate over time. Now, of course, we need to draw our little graph here. This is time. Bingo. And then this is cost. Now, outside of that, we also have the amount of content and the quality of content associated with those games. Now, you would expect that the higher the cost, the higher the price, the more content you are getting. Now, what we would hope for is a kind of linear increase in quality of content alongside the cost associated. It costs us more, therefore we're getting more content. It costs them more to make, Therefore, all the prices increase and the amount of content, the quality increases so that they can sell more copies, etc. You'd expect that there would be some kind of correlation, roughly, between these two things. But instead, what we have is the amount of content. We'll do this in red now. The amount of content has been decreasing over time, or best case scenario, it's been staying level. So the amount of content that we're actually getting and the quality of that content is maybe increasing at times, but it's much more horizontal. It is not nearly as vertical. It is not increasing at the same rate. So there is a growing divergence between the cost of games and the amount of content that gamers are getting. And the larger this gap gets, the more acutely aware gamers become to the fact that they are paying more money for less material, much more money for less material, and that weighs on their mind. They do not like that. An even worse situation is when a game publisher or developer has created something that would in fact be in line with their, the previous correlation between content and price, and they do have this amount of content here, but they take and they chop out that content and they bring it down here and they resell it. So the game actually launches with some content that is far below what you would ever expect, and then over time, within another month, they can then they allow gamers to buy that content, thus increasing their monetization even further and decreasing the amount of content the gamers have at launch. So there's all these different ways, techniques, on-disc DLC, pay-to-win systems, loot boxes, microtransactions, all of this stuff, season passes that expire on a yearly basis, that are increasing the gap constantly between the amount of money it takes to have a full finished product on your system that you can play and the amount of content that you're actually getting and the time span that it takes to have that finished product. Okay, back to the scripted stuff. That was decent. Because of this divergence between product cost, monetization, and relative quality and scope of included material, combined with the fact that more and more games were and are launching in similar windows than ever before, gamers are paying more for less more frequently, and it is an unsustainable trajectory. Consolidation and relative collapse on a AAA level does not mean that gaming as we know it will cease to exist. Far from it, in fact. But it means that fringe titles, indie companies, and lesser-known development studios will become a more important source of entertainment because they have the freedom to act independently and capitalize on current popularity trends, rather than kicking some franchises to death every single year and following proven blueprints for fear of not meeting quarterly earnings report benchmarks. The AAA gaming publishers are going to have a very hard time pulling out of this nosedive. They are under a microscope and they're losing ground. This much ground from a shareholder perspective is a huge deal, one that spurs panic and, hopefully not, but quite possibly, further monetization scams in order to stem the bleeding. What is needed is a departure from the standard game formats, abandonment of the shoddy, lazy, and poorly developed yearly release franchises, and a resurgence of fresh innovation and risk-taking that seems to have died out some time ago. There are, of course, some gleaming examples of this. Something like Cyberpunk 2077 that a lot of people are continuing to talk about seems to be something that truly takes an innovative step forward and is taking the time to properly be developed. Also coming from a studio that does not plan to have loot boxes or pay-to-win mechanics or even very many microtransactions, it seems, if we can look at historical references. So these types of positive examples do exist, but there's not enough of them. I've never really embraced reactionary content, though I do react to many things on the channel, like Bethesda's continued blunders with Fallout 76, or the choices that Rockstar makes with Red Dead 2 Online. I prefer, when possible, to do predictive content, analyzing trends and assessing why things may come to pass, what I expect and do not expect, and that type of video intrigues me, and apparently I used to be a lot better at it than I am today if my previous gaming collapse video is to be trusted as any sort of barometer. I predict continued collapse and consolidation, most likely one or two major buyouts in the near future that result in publishers we have embraced up till now for the past few years as being industry giants getting absorbed and repurposed or bought out by their competition. For the average gamer, the landscape will not change dramatically, save for an increased emphasis on picking the titles that you trust, since so many are now unfinished, botched release garbage, and maybe, for those willing, a larger emphasis on scouting smaller indie development studios to find gems in the rough and support actual innovation and risk-taking projects. That's going to wrap it up though. I will be out of town for the holiday season in just a couple of days, and I won't be resuming videos until early January. For those that made it this far into the video, I just wanted to let you know that so it doesn't come out of nowhere. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below: Facebook group, Discord server, our own gaming forums, and some more stuff as well. As always, thank you for watching. I'll stop rambling there, and have a nice night.